Okay, look, the way I was planning on doing this is just, I'm going to go through it. I'll try and keep a decent pace, but feel free to interrupt at any time. I'll break every now and then just in case there's questions, or I will have Q&A at the end. But I don't want this to be just kind of a one-way thing because a lot of the concepts I'm going to discuss are high level, probably a lot of the stuff that you're already across. But again, it's more just kind of if there's any sort of things that I mentioned or described that sound a little bit, out of whack, or in quite often cases when I speak to a lot of people, they've come across newer, better methods, or maybe they're using older ones. It's always stuff that I love to hear. The Linux user group, I understand the open source focused. Myself, been contributing open source for a long time. I do work at Puppet, which means I do need to promote the enterprise part of it as well, because that's what pays for the staff and the salary. But again, at the end of the day, it's Puppet. For those that aren't aware, originally it was open source for the first 6 years, and then of course they kind of needed money in order to expand it and so forth. Actually, I'll just start off quickly. Puppet, what is Puppet? I think probably most in the room might know what it is. Puppet was originally a project. The concept was based on, there was another app out at the time called CF Engine, which is basically you shouldn't need to, when you're doing sysadmin, you shouldn't need to repeat yourself. You shouldn't need to look up every intricate difference between different machines, different versions, etc., etc. So Puppet was kind of like a rebuild of that, written in Ruby because that was kind of the fashionable language at the time. It was an open source project, and it just kind of, went from there. So Puppet, and then this was just around the time Puppet version 1 was released. It branched into 2 separate parts. One, there was another group of people. But again, you've got to realize that Puppet was, even now though, the enterprise part of Puppet, 20% of all kind of revenue that we do is all reused back into the open source community. And it is, that culture still is maintained. It's a little bit more kind of hardened than what it used to be back in the day, but yeah, it's still that thing. When you're using it in a big organization, we've got a few extra features here and there, which does make it easier to scale, easier and quicker. But if you're, looking after a lab, or, if you're doing some stuff in your home lab, in my opinion personally, and this is, a bit plucked out of the air as far as numbers go, but I think if you're using 20 to 30 servers or less, and you're quite handy around the terminal, open source can provide most of what you want. If you need to rely on the GUI for that sort of range, then it might be a little bit different. But again, Puppet is just a tool that automates a lot of the repetitive and boring stuff that most sysadmins would do. Anyway, that's kind of what Puppet is. That's that. Introduce that today. I'm just going to be talking about parallel tasks across the infrastructure. What I mean by parallel tasks is that instead of doing box A, box B, box C, box C, D, box E, F, etc., if you're doing the same thing, it really should be one single task. It shouldn't be multiple tasks. It should be something you just shoot off and wait for it to happen. It's, the act of logging in, checking what SSH key you need, or, if it's a winner or whatever, that's arbitrary. You shouldn't waste your time on that. So that's what the main focus of my talk will be today, and I really do appreciate everyone taking the time to listen. Okay, so just a little bit about me. Sorry, this is me there. YREM picture, well, just because my picture there, that's me in the corner. In all the presentations, I've done that same joke, and I've yet to hear a laugh, but I believe it's going to come one day. Anyway, I've been at Puppet since 2016. Up until then, I pretty much focused in Java development. Moving from Java being the language it is onto the concepts of Puppet was a complete reversal of mindset for me, because you don't care about the how, you just care about the end result, so forth. Basically, I look after different areas. Oh, just got to note that someone keyboard. Thank you. That's made my day worthwhile. I'm going to keep this up for another 2 years, and then someone's grandkids will laugh at it, hopefully. Yeah, so based in Sydney, so where we were working from home for the last year or so, but we just borrowed a WeWork to get together every now and then just so we can see what everyone looks like, because we've got each other's faces. But yeah, since working at Puppet, did quite a few stints in Singapore, so that's where our Asia office is. Then I spent about 8 months in Japan, sorting out the market situation there. But since then, we've gone through the partner channels for that. But yeah, either Puppet's a really good company to work at, or I've just worked at a lot of bad ones. I don't know, but so far it's been fun. Anyway, back on topic. So I started with orchestration. This is the term that a lot of people use. Maybe it's because of what comes up in Google results or what have you. Orchestration is when you're trying to manage multiple things. Oh, there we go. So I was going off the template used for presentations, and this came up, so I thought I might do that. But like it says down there, orchestration is nothing new, and pretty much all the concepts I'm going to talk about today aren't either, but they're becoming more and more important. So as I said before, none of the things I'm going to mention today, I very much doubt are going to be a surprise to anyone listening. But the problem is because no one's really cared too much about them up until now, and due to the way things are, speeding up, efficiency, go back 100 years, gold was very valuable. These days, compare gold to information tops it, All the big companies are using information to do that. What makes valuable information? Fast information, accurate information. So things like efficiencies and so forth, they're becoming a commodity in themselves. So orchestration is something we've always done. We've always kind of, managed to manage large groups of things. There's been massive companies for the last few hundred years. But the problem is more and more companies of smaller size are becoming more and more agile. And as a result, they're moving faster. And, the early bird gets the worm, so to speak. That's kind of where it's at the point now where it's not how fast you can do, it's how many inefficiencies you can get rid of, how many things you're wasting time on that you can remove that is going to add value to your process. And that's why has it become more and more important. A company that's doing things, and as I mentioned before, I did a lot of work in Asia. They do have somewhat of this is specifically Singapore and Japan, so I'm not speaking for any other countries in the region. They do have the benefit of a somewhat conservative culture, whereby you do have to move faster than everyone else, but because everyone does like to stick to do what works, that sort of culture has somewhat slowed down the process of the competitors. So they know they need to do it, but they have a little bit more leeway. So that is the area now where this is really becoming hot stuff. So if you believe that you're really good with agile concepts and so forth, Hong Kong used to be good, but that's, as you know, politically not so much so. But yeah, Singapore and more so Japan, they're the good places to go, because they've got the resources, they've got the finance, but they just don't have that culture in order to move faster than the competitors. But they do have a lot of people. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So orchestration, actions across multiple items in a coordinated manner. So why? It's because, I see a lot of inefficiencies and so forth. Why is it important? And again, I did kind of rabble on a bit and mentioned it a few times before, but it's, if we think back to, kind of the primary school days, if John takes 2 hours to build one house, how long does it take him to build two? And you go, 4 hours, 3, 6 hours, and so forth. That is kind of, how we're taught time management and so forth, and that's what they also reference as traditional economics, in that if it takes one person A to do it, it should take them 2A to do double. But in IT, because we're not dealing with physical things, because we're dealing with abstractions, we can cut that down. If the time it takes to do A is, say, 1 unit of time, but the way we do it is exactly the same for the second time, it should take us not 0 time, because we still have to kind of deploy or implement it, but kind of a very small delta above 0, sort of thing. So if we can get it right, we can automate it. To do it 1 time, to do it 100 times, should be the amount of time taken less than 2 times out of 1. And that, my kids just started school recently, so that's, can't really teach them that because the teacher will be angry, but that's kind of what we're aiming for. And in doing so, people have leftover time, and because you're paying good money for, people that are working in software, smart people that really want to do smart things, it's very common with people with that leftover time, they'll come up with even more efficient ways. So it's recursion, it's, I forgot the word now, almost like a feedback loop. You make efficiencies in one area, and just by implementing that through time, you become more and more efficient. So just repeating these in a bit of a strung out version. Why is it important? First of all, people make mistakes. I like to play games on the, not as much as I used to, don't have time to do so now. I consider myself probably a bit of a gamer now. In the 1 or 2 hours I've got before going to bed, the majority of time something has gone wrong. It's been a finger just a little bit off a key. Push the wrong key, you got half a second, that sort of thing. A lot of the time people make mistakes. It's either they misheard what someone asked, someone mistyped something in an email, or they mistyped it when they were typing it into the actual application itself, when they're doing a deployment or a rollout. One of them, is your hearing, the other one's your fingers and that. All these things, if they were done in a purely digital manner, it wouldn't occur. This is something that happens as a result of humans implementing it. Which is not a bad thing, because, seriously, go back 50 years, there was no other option. A lot of the benefits we got from the current IT area at the moment is, because we've moved so quickly. And people are scared of the word automation because they think they're going to lose their jobs. No, automation isn't going to get people to lose their jobs. It's going to mean that they're going to become more valuable doing stuff that they don't, need to do, because machines are going to take that out for them. Boredom, and this is something. Again, I want to be as transparent as I can. When I talk to potential customers, when I talk to existing customers, and that sort of thing, talking about the value of automation in software, this is something I bring up a lot. It's a hard conversation to have because it's a highly subjective topic. What's boring for one person could be fun for another. One person's crossword could be another person's Candy Crush, or whatever it is that helps you enjoy your time. But if you're, especially if you're in a role where you like to challenge yourself mentally, academically, and you're in a role where you're not using your brain, that it's kind of counterintuitive, because you kind of think, well, people want an easy life. I disagree with that. I think people want to feel as though they're being productive. If you're doing something that you don't see an instant ROI and instant return on your effort, you don't see, productivity appearing, you feel loss of value as a person, you kind of think, why am I doing this job? Why am I here? And that is a big problem. And it's a conversation that not a lot of people are, well, smaller companies, they see it very quickly because when one person goes, the impact is massive. A lot of the larger ones, I don't know if it's a case if they don't know or if they don't care, but this in itself, a boring job is not going to get you the results you want. Okay, you need to give someone a feeling that what they're doing is meaningful, it's also productive, and it's also recognized. When you do the same thing multiple times, even if it is productive or even if it is valuable, you got your serotonin, dopamine levels, they drop. That means you feel less valuable as a result of it. And the natural thing is, if you're someone that's, doing really well and you know enough people, it just means you're going to move on to another area, which is at the loss of the company. And again, like I said at the beginning, if you're doing it the same way every time, you should really only need to construct the framework once. Okay. And then, of course, expensive talent. This is a very interesting concept because I've noticed the conversation is massively different from country to country. I really don't want to focus on anything political, but I'll just say it's a combination of both two things, both politics and culture. Actually, sorry, three things: politics, culture, and average wage. In Australia, a lot of people don't realise how expensive human resources are. And I say that in a very good way. The fact that it's expensive to hire a person in Australia, I personally think is a good thing. I think people should be more expensive because that will kind of reduce the gap as well. But in some other countries where they got, kind of higher population, less resources, it goes down. But what people don't understand, they'll hire someone, maybe they're on, say, 80K a year as a salary. And they say, okay, we'll use this person to do this in 2 weeks because we don't want to automate, spend 3 weeks automating it. But if that person has to do it twice, that's 4 weeks, which is a month, a 12th of 80. My maths is poor. It will be about a bit over $7,000. That's that's a financial thing, but people don't factor in people's wages in calculating expense. If you're paying for someone and they're sitting there doing nothing, you're wasting money. Or if you're paying for someone, they're doing something they don't like, they're going to disappear. And likewise, if you're paying for someone that could, that doesn't need to do something, that could be automated, that's another area of wasting money. So all these concepts I mentioned so far, because I've used the template for Puppet, it's down in the corner there. None of this is Puppet specific. We do sponsor, it's called the DevOps report, and which is with Splunk and a lot of other companies as well. There's a lot of them. A lot of our competitors as well, they agree with us. These are things that we're at the stage now where we don't need to waste our time on anymore. We can work out a way that's not just, it's not just scripting anymore, it's cross-platform, it's hybrid cloud. We know what we want to achieve. We don't have to do it step by step anymore. We can work it out once, and then we can add in the non-default values later on, and then we've got basically, our end goal as a single task. Cool. And of course, this one here, cuddles become pets. This is a term I didn't actually hear before I joined Puppet. Reason being, as I mentioned before, I was a developer. As a developer, my mindset was every machine is different. Even if I've got a cluster of 4 machines, I believe that, machine number one had that little bit of extra memory than number two, etc., etc. I treated every machine as a special snowflake. It's not the case anymore. And the adoption of cloud is one of the best examples of that. No one cares. Anyone that's using the cloud heavily, they don't care about the underlying hardware. All they care about is the specs that are presented to them. Sometimes they might get a little bit extra, sometimes not. But it's an abstraction now. We're not plugging things in anymore. I mean, serial cables are a thing of the past. You really need to look at what you're trying to achieve, what the purpose of each thing is, and go from there. And that abstraction layer, go back 20 years, it was zones and Solaris, but now it's become containers, which has now gone into, cluster containers such as Kubernetes and Docker Swarm. The point now is the people that are getting paid to care don't care about that level. They're 4 or 5 levels of abstraction above it. They basically look at the input, the output, and treat everything else like a black box. Go further up in management, and it's even worse, You mention the word Kubernetes to them, and, they think you're talking about a type of pasta. But and I'm not saying you've got to treat every machine the same. You need to find out what is common across machines and treat that commonality the same. So whether it's a baseline, whether it's security, they're 2 things that come off the top of my head. If it's web servers, if you've got standardized ports, if it's host names, or if it's namespace naming conventions, it doesn't matter. But the more commonality you have amongst your machines, it means when something goes wrong and the documentation is not available, it makes it easier for the person trying to fix it to guess or to know where to look for it. If not, it's like going through a garbage bin, and sooner or later you might find something you like or find something that's quite detrimental. Again, it's when you're dealing with very small situations. I'm thinking less than 10 servers. Okay, everything's different. That makes plenty of sense. But once you start passing, personally, I think about the 30 mark, you'll find commonalities across your machines, and you should group those commonalities into kind of single things. Manage them as one, not as one sitting across 5 machines, but as 5 machines sharing one setting. Cool. And that brings me to Bolt. I'll just pause for a minute here. Just want to know if there's any questions before I continue. Good, don't see anything. Okay, I'll take it as a wait to the end. Now, quite good. Bolt, Bolt is an open source tool. It is free. It's always going to be free. I'll just start off that. The reason I chose Bolt is because Bolt is developed by Puppet. Myself being from Puppet, it's the tool I know most about. In previous life, in fact, literally before I worked at Puppet, I had dabbled with Chef and Ansible. And that's about it. It hasn't really been something that was on my radar a lot because the work I was doing was a little bit different. What is Bolt? Well, Bolt is an open source orchestration tool. I was really happy when they announced the Bolt project, which was about 3 years ago, because what happened was, Luke Knees, he was the original founder of Puppet. He really pushed the whole open source thing. The CEO changed, and then things became a little bit more commercial. This was their first step at moving back. Why is that a good thing? Because one, it's free, it means more people use it, and there's also more feedback. It's one of those tools where there's never going to be plans to make money off the tool, but there is plans to leverage everyone's contribution to make it a better tool. And I'm kind of down that way, so that's why I quite like it. That's going to, and also on the other side of things, Bolt is something that a lot of Puppet customers were asking for, and it was always on our roadmap, but didn't get quite the attention it needed. And then, yeah, along comes Red Hat, and they acquired Ansible, and Ansible got a lot of attention, and that's really what made a lot of people wake up to say the customers that were asking for it, they knew what they wanted, they were onto something. The idea behind Puppet is decide what the state is. This is what you want your machines to look like. Automate what they need to do to get to that state. What is Bolt? What do you want your machines to do? And it doesn't matter if it's 1 or 100. Don't waste time doing it on multiple machines. Work out what you want them to do. Choose the machines you want to do that and get them to do it. So it doesn't affect their state. It's a functional thing as opposed to a state-based thing. It's not declarative, it's imperative. So Bolt it's a tool that's written in Go. And again, that was more of a choice of one of the original designers who came to Puppet from Google, and they kind of had Go hammered into them. Originally, I thought it was an immature language, but the more I've used it, the more I quite like it. It's not great for everything, but no language is. But I think, if Go has a lot of advantages, if you're making something that's not specific and quite generic, the tutorials on the Google site are quite good. I'd recommend having a look at that. So what is Bolt? It's, like I said, it's a remote execution tool. That's what it started off with. It's a way of doing something on multiple machines without having to do them one by one. The commands. So the name of the tool is Bolt. So whenever you want to run something, you start off with the command Bolt. If you on the remote machine, okay. So once you write the word Bolt, anything you write after that is what's going to be based on the remote machine. So Bolt command. Run, if you want to run a command on that remote machine, basically it'll copy that command as is, SSH or WinRM to that machine, run that command, and then send back the output. That being said, so if it's a command that's Linux specific and you run it on a group that has Windows and Linux, you'll get 0 return codes from Linux, but you will get errors back from Windows. So you do need to be aware of what the target is. Scripts is, as you can imagine, it copies a script across and it will run that. The language of the script, that can be anything at all, as long as it's runnable on the remote system. So if you had Python installed on a remote system, you can run Python scripts, of course Windows PowerShell, Bash scripts, Z Shell, Corn Shell, whatever you want. If it's runnable on the remote system, you can pass it through Bolt. Then tasks and plans. These are a little bit Puppet specific. Tasks are pretty much something that's runnable, whether it be a script or what have you, or a command. It's just encapsulated with a JSON file that outlines what parameters are available or whatnot. The reason being, if you do that, then you can export it to Puppet, and then you've got a nice menu of what you can implement and whatnot. And then finally, plans. Plans is just a combination of tasks. It's a grouping of tasks, but it also adds logic to it. So if you needed to run a task, but you have maybe task 1, task 2, and which one you run is based on the return value of another task, then you encapsulate it in a plan and add the logic in there. The plans, so that's actually written in-house. The language is somewhat Ruby-esque, but it's, again, we've stripped down as much as we can to really kind of keep it to the most important parts. Okay. Cool. And when using Bolt, once you install Bolt, it'll make up what we call a Bolt folder, and it has the following files in it. Bolt project. So that's just if you want to outline anything that's specific to the machine that you got that installation of Bolt on, any specific parameters and so forth. inventory.yaml, which I'll show in a short while. This is kind of the powerful part. This is where you group all your machines. This is where you classify your machines. This is going back to the pets versus cattle paradigm, and you decide what machines have what commonalities, and you write it in that. It's in the YAML format. That's kind of the popular one these days. I'm a bit of a JSON person myself, but it's their own Puppet file. I'll get back to that in a moment. And then we've got modules as well. And then task plans and files. If you've got any static files that need to be sent across in order for that task to achieve its goal, you can check it in that directory as well. So once you install Bolt out of the box, it'll just have one directory called Bolt. None of this will be in it. You just make what you need and then add it as a result. One of the most common use I've seen, so when Bolt first came out, probably the first thing that someone came back saying, oh yeah, that's pretty decent, was there was a bug that proliferated across their systems, and it caused a particular service to freeze up. So they could log in and just reset the service, and that was easy, but just using this and copy and pasting the list of IPs of all the servers affected, they ran that. It wasn't massive, it was just something that might have been 2 hours, became 10 minutes, and that's, you know, kind of time saved from there. Cool. So this is the inventory.yaml file. Typical sort of YAML format, and by that, what I mean is make sure the indentation is correct. So YAML being a Python derivative, indentation is important. Make sure everything's the right thing. Groups. So in this, you make groups, and then you can do a list of either host names, IPs. You can give aliases to that. The reason that's good is if, you know, when you're writing the Bolt command, and you've got massive URLs, URIs, you don't want to overload the terminal and make a mistake, so it's hard to troubleshoot otherwise. And then you can preset credentials and so forth. Again, so you don't have to type in every time. Another thing about these credentials, when doing this inventory YAML file, you can create a key pair to encrypt these credentials, or you can do a password encryption as well, whereby the inventory YAML file, it'll look the same as this, but any part that has somewhat sensitive information will be encrypted. So the only person that can use this file to those particular groups will need to have either the key or the password in order to implement them. There is, of course, yeah, common configuration options. One of the common ones, yeah, in Linux is host name check, because I always forget to update the known hosts file. And of course, Puppet Forge. So Puppet Forge, in fact, I'll just see if I can bring it across now. The Forge is a very good place. Okay, here we go here. This is Puppet Forge. I think we've got about 7,000 modules. Bolt being fairly new, is around the lines of about a few hundred, but these are pre-written tasks. So if it's something very common, and I'll try and find modules with tasks, here we go. It's just one of those things, because it's been tested and run a lot of times, it saves you, you know, maybe 2 or 3 days of having to write and test it yourself. And we've got a lot of stuff here. So really, really common stuff that you may need to use across multiple machines is already available here. And again, this is part of the community stuff, open source. Anyone can download it. Nothing's tracked. The numbers are tracked as in how many people, but that's about it. We don't know who did what. And again, it's, you know, one of those ways where if you need to do a yum update, well, yum update is probably, you can just do the command. But if you wanted to check via yum the SSL packages of a particular versions on your whole fleet, you can just download this, use Bolt, and again, it's like a 5-minute job. So because we've got the Forge there, and even myself though, you know, 'cause, in Puppet I did a lot of the training. I've only ever written one module myself. Reason being is every time I try to write one, I'll look on the Forge, and there's already someone that's written one that's much, much better. Cool. So I'll go back one. Before we do that, just give you a quick look at what Bolt Bolt looks like, and then we'll just hop into the Q&A. Cool. Okay. So in general, if you want, the commands are there. Some of them I can remember, some I don't. Usually I just run command Bolt here, and then it's got a list here. So it depends on what I want to do. If you're already using Puppet, then apply is quite cool. If you're not, then you can go through it, skip that. Command, as I mentioned before, if you want to run a remote command. In fact, I'll just do one now. So I'm copy and pasting this just because I don't want to go wrong. So this one here, so you can see you've got Bolt command run. The command is ping 8888, which is Google's DNS, C2, and targets. So this machine I'm on now is Bolt next 0, Bolt next 1. Then I'm going to use, I think that private key might not be there. I might need to copy it across, but I'll run it and see what happens. Might be an error as the private key isn't there. Won't be a moment. And then there it is there. Just move it first. Okay. Go back to the last one. That. User should be sent from sorry. Apologies. There we go. And it's just come back with that. So it looks like you're running it locally, but in fact you're running it remotely. The other good thing is here, if you look there, it says targets. So I can do multiple targets. I've got a few here. I do that as well as plug bolt mix 2. They're both using the same user and key. Sorry. There you go. And now it's running, does the same thing, but does it on both machines. But you'll notice that when doing it on 2 machines, the time taken compared to doing it on 1 machine was pretty much not that different. And that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. If you're doing the same thing on multiple machines, so if you're doing, task A on X number of machines, it shouldn't take you A times X amount. It should take you maybe 2 times at max the amount of times you're doing the same stuff. A lot of people do this kind of, SSH step-by-step scripting. That's fine as long as you're dealing with the same version of the same OS on the same script. Cool. then I might just quickly just show you an example of what, wait a moment, what one of the inventory files looks like. Just give you an example of that. So you notice here when I did targets, I listed each host name one by one. We've got, CentOS and private key and that sort of thing. If we've got multiple machines, different keys for each machine and so forth, it can get a bit complex. This is where you organize it here. Just see if I can bring that across. That might be a moment. Cool. This is one example of what a typical inventory file would look like. You make the groups, give each group a name, you say what the config is, and then you got the user root and so forth. But I can make as many groups as I want and so forth, but it just means every time I run that command, instead of having to list all of them one by one, I can just refer to the targets by the group name, by the target name, or anything there from. That being said, if you've got something such as, I suppose, Datadog or Sumo Logic, where you've got alerts as well, you can use that to trigger this and do self-healing practices, pass in the parameters that you need, and know what services to restart and so forth. Cool. And then finally, just to show what this just go into the bulk. Actually, going here. Just see. Got time sync PS1 here. Again, it's not just, like I said, homogeneous OSs or versions or systems. This, to a certain extent, it's not going to be everything, but provided it's running an OS that's supported, which pretty much covers all the Linux flavors, Windows, Solaris AIX, unfortunately not ZOS at the moment. Again, you can run it, and again, a single command, you can add in certain conditions in your inventory file, or if you were to do a plan or so forth, you can do other logic there. So you run a single command, and it does the same thing on all your machines, regardless of what OS or what version they are. Okay, and the example I'm just going to show you. I do the bolt script run time sync, and then just do targets. So one of the Windows machines, which we plug win0.plus room.public.com, and it should prompt me. Actually, I just got to double check because it needs a prompt. It's Windows prompt for the command. Let's see, I might give an auth failure. Okay, yeah, because of the moment. Let's put a user administrator, and then of course put the password in. Again, this password can be encrypted as well. I'm just doing it here for time's sake. So this is quite a long and complex command, but again, all of this can be abstracted into your inventory file. stuff something up somewhere. It's okay. I have to debug it another time, but it will work the same based on that. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much what I planned to have shown for you. Again, what I really wanted to focus on was the initial concepts in your organization. If you've noticed that you're doing stuff that's either key things are three things: repetitive, boring, or inefficient or error prone. There are tools out there that you can use. Like I said, me being from Puppet, I've just kind of introduced some of the ones from Puppet. We're not the only ones out there. There are a lot of tools. I think for traditional infrastructure, Puppet's still a pretty good one. As things are moving towards the cloud, there's so much more out there available. But again, it depends on the skills your people have, what their long-term goals are, what your scalability prospects are. You go from there. It's one of those conversations where it provides value to the company, but also, it makes life easier for both yourself and those around you. So, kind of have a think about it, especially those kind of infrastructure management and similar kind of, what areas can you kind of reduce repetition and erroneous behavior. And yeah, here's just some of the tools that can help you along the way. But like I said, I don't want to shove anything down anyone's throat. If you look around, you'll see there's a lot around there. Cool. So at this point, I'll just see if there's any questions. As I say, so I appreciate everyone putting up with my voice for this time.
Hi Simon, I'm just wondering we might try to ask some questions through the chat associated.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yep, that's fine.
So we don't get echo from this microphone.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I've got no problems with that. Okay, yeah, alternatives to Puppet Bolt, depending on what you want to do. Look, it's a very good question. Again, everything I say, I want to try and kind of be as honest and transparent as I can. My knowledge of the alternatives is partly my own research, but also based on what the customers use as well. On the use case, when it comes to initial provisioning, remote execution, easily the one that everyone's used really happy with is Terraform. So that's basically both the provisioning part, but anything you want to do before anyone logs in, Terraform seems to be kind of taking over that area there. When it comes to the same realm as what Puppet Bolt's doing, Ansible, that's massively popular at the moment. Red Hat's been pushing that mainly towards their Red Hat customers, but and again, they're, as far as Ansible goes, so back in the day when I first started at Puppet, the only competitor we were really worried about was Chef. They kind of moved on to other places at the moment. Ansible was never a worry. Now they are. Ansible is probably Puppet's number one competitor at the moment, while Ansible being Red Hat, which is now IBM. And the reason being is early day Ansible, they had one thing they wanted to do, which is what Bolt does there. It's remote execution. They wanted to be able to have a list of something and do it on pretty much what I explained today. And that was it. They didn't want to do anything beyond that. They had one thing they wanted to do well. And back when, go back, Ansible version 1 came out, and I do remember looking at that, the best thing about it was the whole tutorial only went for 1 page. Puppet, we've kind of had a problem. We kind of think, 6 months, 2 years in the future, thinking, okay, what about this, this, and this? And we do have a poor habit of overcomplicating things. Bolt is our attempt at trying to go back to simple times where solve a particular problem as opposed to solving multiple ones. But provisioning, Terraform, Ansible, Salt Stack, they've got some stuff going out. Chef does have agentless stuff coming out as well. And I haven't looked at the CF engine in a while. But that's those off the top of my head. All the cloud, AWS, they got native tools, Azure and Google Cloud as well. They can do similar things, being as the functionality is limited to that cloud provider. But yeah, hopefully answer that question. Can Puppet be used to manage domain controllers and group policy rules and OS deployments? That's a very, very nice question. And just going to go back, to the Forge again. So to answer that question, Bolt, again, it's just a tool that can push stuff and run it remotely. One of the good things about it is because it has this, Bolt apply, means you can leverage existing public code that you can get from here, both tasks and code, but you can also write anything that can be done in Puppet can also be done via Bolt as well. So if you wanted to do like a masterless environment, you can do that there. Domain controllers and group policy. So I'll just type in domain first. I might have to refine it to Windows. Short answer is yes. But it's to use one of these modules will make your life a whole lot easier. So this will go Active Directory domain controllers, and then GPO as well. It can be done. GPO, it would be done via, there's a module called DSC. DSCs are actually, I quite like it. It's started off as a collaboration with Microsoft. It was very, very much a give and take because Microsoft, up until then, Puppet, this is going back 5 years ago, we were not doing as well in the Windows sphere as we wanted to. So Microsoft, they gave us a ton of help. And as a result, a lot of the people working at Puppet at the time worked on DSC, which is like a Microsoft implementation of Puppet, which is why the syntax looks very similar. But using DSC is how you would manage group policy. And then before I showed you, there was that module for domain controllers. I'd use that. I've not used them a lot myself. I will be honest, I'm more of a Linux person. But if using these two, I've seen demos of it being done. So I do believe the people that have told me it can be done. I just haven't done it myself. Cool. Next. So yeah. Again, if I haven't answered the questions fully, please feel free to just tack on extra questions, and I'm happy with that. Do you see Puppet is useful for workflows where servers aren't updated incrementally, but instead just go to set up from scratch, push out config changes? That's that one. That's a very. I very much like that question because it was 2-3 years ago. It was kind of the company direct. We foresaw that everyone was going to have that sort of, every server is going to be treated almost ephemerally, very, very soon. Hasn't happened as quick as we thought. Puppet useful for workflows? Yes, but I will add a caveat there. The way I'd say that is I show you here. So someone mentioned as a Vagrant handler, Vagrant, and that's that's half answering the question. What I was going to say. So we got the Amazon modules. We also got Azure modules. We do have Google Cloud modules. These are all done in collaboration with those companies, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google themselves. Problem being is if a company is only using that cloud provider by themselves, we can't compete against the native tools. The other option is because these cloud companies, and they're massive, and props to them because the tools they're producing are really, really high quality. AWS, my biggest problem, the tools they produce I think are brilliant. My biggest problem with them is they produce too many too quickly. I lose track of what I'm supposed to use for what, but I've never had a problem with that. Google they're great, they're quicker, hard to find, but they're good. And Azure I fell in love with Microsoft again after using Azure tools. But you can see here, the last time we updated this was 2 years ago. There are customers that still use Puppet to do the whole workflow, provision, configure, and so forth. But we've made a conscious decision to, I won't say discontinue service because we're always going to support the people that still use that. There's, usually if something comes out, it's a bug, it's easy to fix. But we're not going to be investing in engineering in those areas. For the simple reason is there's too many other people out there with more resources that are able to make better tools that we can afford to do. We'd have to shift, So our engineering team at the moment, I think is about 220 people. And it's quite broad. So, but for this to be a specific module, we'd probably only be allowed to put maybe about 4 or 5 people on it. And you can't do a multi-cloud, module that's up to date with that number of people. It's just not viable. And it goes both ways. Like we've got a lot of ex HashiCorp people at Puppet and vice versa. There's a lot of people that moved from Puppet to HashiCorp. It's not a corporate relationship. It's more there's a lot of people that know each other. In general, if you want a cross-platform provisioning tool, we recommend Terraform, or if you're using VMs, Vagrant does that sort of thing. It's provisioning. We are going to focus on post-provision. So if your OS is up and running, everything from that point onwards to maintain it until end of life is Puppet. Containers is really kind of the next frontier. We have done a lot of experiments on that. We have, I wouldn't say secretly, there were a few betas released on a few different products that were container focused. They might have been, I don't know, maybe the product wasn't quite a good fit, or might have been too early, or maybe too late. But every company or pretty much any vendor that's kind of in this sort of infrastructure space, sooner or later, they're going to have to start looking at containers. So I'm not privy to that information, but I think that's kind of where we're going to go down further, in which case I think Puppet will play quite an important role in the deployment of containers, but we won't be touching the internals of images. We already do repos for that, but that sort of thing. So above OS, below application layer is kind of the sweet spot we're going to focus on. Sorry for rabbiting on a bit too much there, but that's kind of it. Yeah, but internally, so last thing is, in fact, let's see if I can. I might just send it to mail list because I can't find it. We've got quite a few Git repos for a lot of our internal testing environments. They're all public. And it's basically, if I was to do a customer demo and I want to, from nothing, as long as you got credentials for a cloud environment, takes about 20 minutes to spin up about 7 machines. That's the Puppet Master, GitLab, CDF-PE, and about 4 or 5 Windows and Linux machines. Cool. But that's one of the advantages of Puppet Enterprise. It's a hard question in that. So my role, as mentioned, is a solutions engineer, but I do work very closely with sales. So there is the sales side of things, but what is the real, kind of pure difference? Why do people use Puppet Enterprise as opposed to Puppet Open Source? I'll try and answer that as honestly as I can. And I can't guarantee this is 100% correct, but to the best of my knowledge, it is. Large companies, especially in Australia, it'd be banks, universities, insurance, companies that what you typically think of as corporate, got a lot of people. They'll go enterprise for the main reason that it comes with support. They have internal policies that say you have to get the enterprise version. And a lot of that is because they assign a value to risk. It's a risk mitigation. If something goes wrong, they've got someone to blame. And that's pretty much it. And they look at the price of it and they think, okay, it's cheaper to be able to blame this vendor than it is to hire someone to fix it. And that makes plenty of sense. That's a simple numbers game. If I was to play around with it, if I was just someone kind of looking at the two, this is open source, this is enterprise, which one should I do? The licensing for enterprise, if you're managing less than 10 machines, it's free. You don't need a license. So on multiple levels, from legal, whatever, you can just download it and play with it. I recommend that to people because the setup is easier and all the parts are integrated already. When you're using the open source, Puppet Open Source is a collection of modules. So you've got the Puppet Agent, Puppet Server, or so it's Puppet Server now. Was Puppet Server, then Puppet Master, now it's back to Puppet Server. There's for political correctness, we're going to be renaming certain terminologies within Puppet stuff because they're trying to do the right thing. Agent, Puppet Server, Puppet DB, M Collective has been taken out of the suite. But again, it's you have to know what you want, what you need, and you have to know how to connect them. For people that are very familiar with their environment and people that are very familiar with what those packages do, it's not difficult. It gives you a lot of flexibility as well, which is great because you can do things a little bit, outside the square, things that might help you best. So open source we're always going to have open source out there, and it always gives that flexibility, but there's that prerequisite that you need to know what you're doing. It's, it's kind of like being given a colouring in picture as opposed to a blank piece of paper. You can still achieve the same picture at the end, but you just need to have a little bit more foresight with the blank piece of paper. The one benefit, so again, it's a lot of it is kind of process based, functionality based. RBAC, sorry, that's not RBAC, and reporting is not in open source. If you use form, and you can achieve similar results. Yeah, but like I said, big customers, they want to pay for support, and I have nothing but good things to say about our support team. My first 3 years of my career was in support, and it was pretty rubbish. And the people here, they actually know what they're doing, so I love the guys and girls there. But the other one, so yes, flexibility. Open source, very, very flexible. You can do whatever you want, which is a double-edged sword. In situations where you've got very small teams and very good documentation, and if you're using, version control, so you can roll back, roll forward. If you're very careful, if you're very disciplined in how you control your code and setup, then I think open source is quite a good option because it gives you that extra flexibility to do things that, might be a little bit different to what we recommend. Problem being, if you're using that in a company that has a high turnover. And if it's like places where I've worked, and I'm very guilty of this myself as well, where nothing's written down and you just rely on your memory to what happened, that flexibility can become more detrimental than it is beneficial. So enterprise, you can change everything you want, but there's really highly managed defaults, and even can be overridden. But in open source, it's like an open slammer. So we base it on what customers said. This is what the majority of people do most of the time, and we work in those defaults. So the less you need to change from out of the box settings, the better. So if, the person quits, someone else comes along, there's less of a learning gap, or less of a kind of ramp on time needed. But again, it's more functionality wise. There's some APIs that have been really beneficial for people that use stuff like Splunk and ServiceNow that have kind of given it a lot of value, and there's some patch management. But probably the biggest reasons, and this might change in the coming months, biggest reasons up until now why people use enterprise as opposed to open source is support and that kind of best practices being enforced along the way. Cool. That's great. Actually, one last slide I was going to say. This one here, it's regardless of what it's about. If it's anything related to today's talk, feel free to ping me. If it's something I know the answer to, I'll reply to you straight away and feel good about myself for the day. If not, I'll ask someone else and steal their reply and take the credit for it. But yeah, like I said, if you've got further questions, something you think about maybe tomorrow or a week or a month from now, just feel free to give me a buzz. And like I said, if it's something I don't really know, or if it's something I could ask someone about, I'm happy to get the info for. Or if it's something I can't get the info for, I could probably ask someone who knows someone that can. I'm more than happy to refer you to them. But like I said, I really think that there's a lot of value to be gained from the community. So any information that you want to share or you want to hear, feel free. No need to hesitate. Cheers.